Check, check. Greetings, viewers. Eric the Car Guy here. I hope you didn't catch my microphone check. I went all the way up to the last minute today. Welcome to the live show, which I'm kind of turning into hybrid AMA and hybrid me answering your automotive questions. A few things before I get started. I will be taking the questions from the Google Plus live event. If you don't know where that is, head to my webpage, click on the Google Plus link. That will take you to my Google Plus page, and it should be somewhere up towards the top. And you can go there if you're signed into Google. Post your questions there, and I will do my best to answer them during the show. It's about a half hour long. Now, if I don't get to your question during the show, there is always EricTheCarGuy.com. You were there finding that link anyway. There are tons of resources there to help you. In fact, most of the questions I get asked can be answered over there. I will also link that in the description, along with any other useful information that comes up during the program. So if you have questions, you can always visit the description. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, I cannot see those comments being posted there, or questions being posted there. So unfortunately, I will not be responding to them. I am very sorry about that. However, there's Google Plus. I do these every other week for the most part. And I am just going to get straight to answering your questions. Oh, yeah. The other thing is sometimes I butcher people's names. That's just something that kind of happens. I guess I'm dyslexic or something weird like that. But I try not to. Anyway. On with the show. Brian Genter, did you ever have to give hard advice to a customer that knew nothing about cars who then made ridiculous assumptions and demands? Please elaborate. I'd love the odd comedy that comes with this job. I would say, well, I often tell people that my life is an exercise in Murphy's Law. Therefore, it's not just this job, but just in general. But it seems that with the repair world, I mean, you're catching people at a time in their lives when they're, I don't want to say desperate, but they're looking for help. They're seeking help from you. And I think that's one of the reasons why they become so maybe bent out of shape or whatever with mechanics, because they start from the get-go with a diminished position. So this kind of behavior is honestly not uncommon from what I've seen. And I'm not trying to fault people for it. And in fact, I think it's one of the things that drives people to get into the repair profession to begin with. I mean, I hear it a lot. I hear I was taken by some mechanic and now I want to do work on my own stuff. I've done videos on ETCG1 about this topic also, but point being is that, yeah, I've run into stuff like that. I've run into people that were just flat out unreasonable. In fact, I've said in the past also that people wear their vehicles like they wear their clothes. And you can tell a lot about the person by just looking at their car and how they take care of it in many ways. I'm not saying it's a complete and utter judge of character, but I'm saying it is an outward projection that they put out into the world. And I think it reflects on who they are, and at least to some degree. So as far as specifics, nothing's coming to mind at the moment, but I hope that little tidbit was something that you were seeking. And anyway, moving on. Soul Wagon, long-haired mechanic problems. I noticed you had lush hair and then suddenly didn't, as is generally the way. What was the rage incident that led you to cutting your mane off, possibly involving an exhaust hanger or other pointy thing? I've had long hair and short hair pretty much my whole life. I've gone from one to the other. I think, as a guy, you can have those options. Girls, it's a little different for them. They cut it short, they leave it long. But I get it. I mean, I've gone through, my wife's a hairdresser, so I know hair. And as far as was there any particular instance? No. But let's face it, I'm getting older. Nature is sort of going in that direction anyway. And honestly, thinning long hair to me is not very attractive. So I was just sick of it. And I knew it was going to be the last time I'd have long hair. So that's what it was. And I just decided to move on. It wasn't any particular incident. It was just like, okay, I'm done with this. But and that's one of the reasons why I don't like creepers, because with long hair, you're rolling around in a creeper, it gets stuck under there, and that's a problem. Usually when I worked and I had long hair, is I'd tie it in a ponytail and stick it up under my hat. It's one of the reasons why I often wear hats, because I just got used to doing it. But it also helps protect the rest of my head from foreign objects that come flying at you while you're doing this kind of stuff. Nothing comes to mind as far as what, any instance. It's just I, for lack of a better phrase, outgrew it. But it all comes to that once in a while. I'm still just as handsome. Eric Hagan. Hi, Eric. I'm noticing a slight delay in the throttle response of my 98 Audi A4 B5 when I step on the gas pedal. This made me stall the engine a few times. It's a manual, by the way. I checked the cable on the throttle and it's fine, no slack. Could this be a bad position sensor or as simple as a clogged fuel filter? What are your thoughts? Thanks in advance. There are many different things that can cause an engine hesitation. Some of the things you mentioned right off the bat are some of the main things to check. Also, spark plugs, easy stuff. Many times, especially with something that's OBD2 related, they often set a code if there's some electronic issue, such as a sensor that you mentioned that is causing a problem or causing the hesitation. So if in the absence of a check engine light, what I recommend is going for the basic tune-up items. You mentioned the air filter, I mentioned spark plugs. Also, and I really hate saying this because there's such a can of worms that often gets open, but cleaning the throttle body might be something to think about. On a 98 that has a cable operated throttle, it's less of an issue than the newer vehicles with drive-by-wire. But my forum is littered with people that have cleaned their throttle bodies and they were drive-by-wire and now it doesn't run right. Now they have to get it reprogrammed. It's sort of one of those slippery slope kind of things, but I think you'd be fine with what you have there. It's a whole host of things that could come into play here, but linked in the description will be an article I wrote on performance diagnosis, and it covers a lot of those basics, and there's videos involved and things to check for, like vacuum leaks that could also creep in and cause performance issues of that type. So perhaps walk through that and see if there's something there that could possibly help you with that issue. But basics is what I would go for. Don't go right out of the gate looking for a sensor problem. Unless you have a code for a sensor problem, it's not common that there is a sensor problem. In fact, in my experience, many times automotive issues are simple in nature. So I often tell people, keep it simple, stupid when you're doing your diagnosis. Try not to overcomplicate it. I'm guilty of it myself, but do your best not to overcomplicate things. Lone Maris Montanau. See, there I go already. Hey, Eric, what's your opinion on cleaning turbo vanes on a TDI engine using oven cleaner? I'm looking for a method of cleaning the turbo without removing it from the car. Many thanks. Funny you mention engine cleaner or oven cleaner to clean engine parts, because you probably can't see it, but right here on my arm is a scar from when I had a similar idea and used oven cleaner to clean cylinder heads. Now, I had those big, thick, yellow gloves that you get, and I was using it, but just a little bit of it, just a drop of it got on my skin. Didn't feel it anything, and I just went like this to wipe it away, and along with it went a good chunk of my skin. So they make you wear those big, thick gloves for a reason. That being said, it really did work well on cleaning the gunk off those cylinder heads. So as far as oven cleaner to clean sooty, yucky engine parts, it can work. But definitely be very careful doing it, especially in a confined area where you're trying to clean a turbo, because you get this stuff on your skin and you've got stories to tell people for a long period of time if you're lucky. So wear protective gear if you're going to do it and give it a try. I can't see... I'm trying to see the harm it could do. And like I said, I cleaned cylinder heads like that in the past just because I was looking for a cheaper method than taking it to a machine shop. It worked. That's all I can say is it worked. But I paid a price. Midnight Mystery. Mine's an AMA, and I have a couple of questions. Are you familiar with the Acura RDX? Small turbo crossover SUV, came out for 2007. I just got one pre-owned. I like that they're uncommon. I will be at the dealer having mine serviced, oil change, tire rotation this afternoon. Second, what has been your favorite project? Well, guess the Fairmont. Good luck with that, by the way. Oh, good luck with that, by the way. Thank you, Eric. Okay, yes, I have heard of the RDX. I used to work at the Acura dealer. I was there when they came out brand new off the truck, and we're like, ooh, crossover, SUV, what? Again, because at that time it was like SUV, big, huge thing. And then there was the car. So they had two different distinctions. And Acura at the time decided that was going to be the next greatest thing. And the reason why they're uncommon is because they didn't sell all that well. It was Honda's first turbo-powered vehicle. I found them to be inconsistent. And when I say inconsistent, getting them new off the truck, you drive one RDX, and it seemed like the boost and the turbo would be like really working well. And you'd get into another one, and it seemed like it had a little bit of lag. So like I said, it was a little bit inconsistent. Love the idea, love the concept. Wish they would have put it in something like a TSX, you know, like a car to have some fun with, like a turbocharged little Acura all-wheel drive. Fun. Because I didn't really care for the SUVs all that much, especially the RDX. I didn't like the looks of it. You know, I wasn't really pleased with the performance. It wasn't my cup of tea. If it's yours, more power to you. However, the oil recommendation for that engine is Mobil 1. So you have to run synthetic Mobil 1 and according to the factory service manual and to stay in compliance for engine warranties, that kind of thing. Just saying. So you have to run a full synthetic. They recommended Mobil 1. Similar to the Corvettes around that vintage. As far as favorite project, duh, yeah, it's the Fairmont. I waited 30 years to start building this car, and people are all like, you know, clamoring after a couple of years of me owning the thing. When are you going to do Fairmont videos, Eric? Well, you know, you have to put money together. You have to come up with a plan. You have to do all these things. It's not something that necessarily happens overnight. But yes, it's happening. It's happening right stinking now. In fact, I am putting in a lot of extra hours at the shop just to get that project finished, done. Overcoming roadblocks, shooting tons and tons of video, and you're all like, Eric, we want to see the videos now. Well, guess what? It takes time to edit videos, and I can't just like poop out edits like that. It takes hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, and then some more hours, and then you upload it to YouTube, and then you got to write a description, and then you got to put all the other stuff together, and then you respond to the comments, and it's this endless cycle. But don't feel bad for me, Argentina or whatever. It's par for the course. It's what I do. It's my job. But my point in saying that is it takes a little bit to put things together. However, once the ball gets rolling and you start seeing the Fairmont videos, by the time it's all done, you'll be sick of it, asking for something else, I'm sure, or asking for more. Who knows? I know I'm loving this project. I'm loving everything about it. You know, fixing cars is one thing. And I'll be honest, I worked for an Acura dealership. And for the most part, Hondas are part replacement. I'll just flat out be honest. They can ruin you. If you work for, well, if you worked for Honda during the 90s, it was a whole lot of parts replacement. And it kind of gets boring. You kind of don't really get a chance to truly fix things, but once in a while. But making something, modifying something, changing it, altering it, you know, fabrication, I'm really digging that work a lot. It's a whole different mindset. It's a whole different way of doing things. And if I had my choice between fixing things or making things, I want to make stuff like videos for YouTube. Jason Gurry. Hi, Eric. In regards to your career in the automotive industry, have you ever done or seen people do dangerously unsafe things when working on parts or vehicles? I have, for example, used lumbar logs to increase the lifting height of my jack on rare occasion, which I always feel uneasy about. I've done the exact same thing. In fact, I even think I showed it in one of my engine replacement videos way back when I worked in the old shop, trying to do that, get underneath a truck to get it up high enough to get the transmission out. I've done it, and I feel the same way you do. So I try to stay way back until I get the jack stands placed. And once the jack stands are in place, great. But yeah, I've used wood blocks to help lift things up, and felt pretty sketchy about it. But you know, I've seen a lot of things. I've done some things too. In fact, I've got a video about my mechanic fails. I forgot to tighten down a wheel once, and it came off while I was driving down the road. That was definitely a wake-up call. Nobody was hurt. Car wasn't hurt. You can drive a Ford F-150 on the drums. Just saying. However, I don't recommend it, especially in traffic, because that can be nerve-wracking, to say the least. That being said, I've seen cars fall off of lifts before, not with me. I've seen cars come through walls. That was back when I was in school. Somebody was working on brakes on the alignment rack, and they came off the alignment rack without pumping up the brakes first, and they just went right off the alignment rack and right through the wall, right behind the teacher that was sitting right in front of me. His eyes got really big. Nobody was hurt, but except for pride. There was a lot of pride hurt that day, but it's certainly something I'll never forget. I mean, it was a Kool-Aid man moment with a car. It was not the same in real life as it is on TV. I'll just say that. Alan Zero, back again with my 73 Mustang, moved to brakes because wiring is all shot for the ignition, which is why I had no spark and will have to be changed. I recommend Painless. They make just wiring harnesses for them. In fact, I'm working on getting one for the Fairmont. And that it's like plug and play stuff. They call it Painless for a reason. You know, I don't mean to gush about them, but I know them and I know their products, and they're pretty good, especially in your situation. So look them up. I'll link it in the description when I get a minute after we finish this video. Anyway, getting back to your question, the front brakes can bleed just fine with one person method of pumping brakes and one person bleeder, but back brakes seem clogged. I have vacuum bled them with the tool borrowed from Advanced Auto, and it pulls vacuum, but when I crack the bleeder, it lets vacuum out slow or I get no fluid. I've seen it could be the distribution block four-wheel drum brakes, but looking at cutaways, it seems even if it turned on the light, it shouldn't be blocking fluid completely. Do you know if I should replace the lines, the block, or if it just might be something I'm missing? Thanks again for all you do. Now, I sort of ran into this problem on the Fairmont yesterday when I changed over to rear disc brakes. I bled everything out and I wasn't getting any brake pedal back there. I believe in my case, the reason is because it was all set up for drum brakes. So it's not set up to send an extreme amount of pressure back there. That's the reason why in my kit, they sent me an adjustable proportioning valve. I think in your case, four-wheel drum brakes, it's been a while since I worked on those. I know older GM proportioning metering blocks have a special tool that you have to put on there to hold the valve in place so that it will allow fluid to pass the rear brakes. And I'm wondering if there's something similar going on with yours. You say that it shouldn't block the brakes, but if that needle moves, I think it's supposed to move to block any other fluid from leaking out. It's designed to prevent a catastrophic failure of the brakes, so that if the rear brakes fail, you still have front brakes. That's the whole point. So I'm thinking in that metering block is where the issue is, and I'm not sure if it's a special tool that you've got to do, or I don't remember the procedure. I mean, this is 73 we're talking about, and it's been a while since I've worked on something that old. In that particular setup, but I think that's the direction you need to look as far as that's concerned. What I've also done is I've also pinched off the rubber hoses going to the front wheels while bleeding, just to like force things to go into the back. You might consider doing that, and that way all of the force goes to the back wheels, and if you don't have any fluid coming out there, there's definitely something blocking it, because if you're sending all the force from the pedal to the back wheels and you're still not getting it, there's something not right there. So hopefully that advice can help you. George Buckhard. Hey, Eric. First, thanks for taking my questions in the past. I love the show, and I'm so glad you still do the live show. Thanks. Can you explain how a clogged air filter hurts fuel economy? It obviously reduces airflow, but I would expect the metering done by the ECU using MAF or MAP sensors should adjust the air fuel mix accordingly. So I don't see why the stoichiometry, say that 5 times fast. Stoichiometry. Hey, did it. Would be off, why mileage would go down, aside from maybe having a run at a higher RPM to get the same power, but that shouldn't make a huge difference. Shouldn't the effect be just like driving at a higher altitude? My mileage doesn't change noticeably when I'm driving in the Sierras versus at sea level. Thanks. I wondered about this and have not found a satisfying explanation online. George, I'm with you. I think you're absolutely right in that even if you do have a clogged air filter, the computer will compensate and try to give you the best fuel mixture possible. Older vehicle, the carburetor, it's probably a different story because those highly depend on the airflow going through the carburetor. So if there's less airflow, more fuel could be coming in, that kind of thing. But who's driving carbureted vehicles these days? However, fuel injection was designed to give consistent fuel delivery and consistent emissions. That was the part of the whole point. That was part of the mandates that came about. And they said, hey, you've got to do this. And you have to meet these emission standards and under a variety of conditions. So they were designed to deal with exactly what you're talking about. So yes, I believe that it will compensate. Now, will you have the same power output? That's the real question. It's not so much an effect on fuel economy, but if you're not able to draw in as much air, you're not going to be able to make as much power. And I think the only time you really see this is at higher RPMs, when you're under extreme load, when the engine is really thirsting for air. So if it has a restriction at those times, then I think you're going to lose power. I don't necessarily think that it would compromise fuel so much, but you're compromising fuel anyway when you're at wide open throttle and driving like that. So yeah, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. But I actually agree with you. I don't think it's going to have that effect, an adverse effect on fuel economy. Now, as far as power output, that's a different story. But fuel economy, I don't think it will affect it because the system is designed to, be one, just consistent fuel economy across the board. Colin Piorg, sorry if I said that. Pigor, yeah. What is your opinion of keyless ignition systems? That is, the car has an engine start-stop button instead of a traditional ignition switch. I personally believe keyless ignition is a non-solution to a non-problem. Once again, I agree with you, man. Actually, cars used to be that way before we had keys. It used to be push-button start on just about everything. And the whole push-button start movement is a retro thing. And I almost think it started with the Honda S2000. I'm not real sure, but that's where I first started seeing it. And of course, I worked on Hondas, but a few other places, maybe it was I don't know, but it really caught on, and it's a marketing thing. It caught on as a marketing thing because really it doesn't matter. I mean, whether you're turning the key or pushing a button, it's still something activating a relay, which activates a switch, which what causes your starter to start. No big deal. But race cars, it's kind of cool. You see them flipping all those switches, and one of those switches causes the starter to engage. Flipping switches is fun, makes you feel techie and cool and nerdy. Whatever necessary? Absolutely not. In fact, they went to just one turn of the key as a matter of convenience over turning a key and then pushing a button. So really, it's less efficient in a lot of ways. It's a marketing thing. There's nothing that's necessary about it. Scott Duty has a 2003 Honda Accord 2.4-liter K-Series engine, manual transmission, 141,000 miles. Car burns a quart of oil every 700 miles. I bought the car used in February 2015, so I have no knowledge of prior service. I have to do a clutch job soon, so I got to thinking maybe I should replace the engine at the same time. Reading through the ETCG forum, and it seems K-Series engine is notorious for burning oil. Is burning oil every 700 miles normal for this engine, or should I replace the engine? If you advise engine replacement, can you recommend any online sites? Is there any way to tell if a used engine burns oil? I wouldn't want to replace the engine and end up with the same problem again. Other than burning oil, everything else is mechanically sound. In fact, I just purchased a new set of Michelin tires on the vehicle and plan on keeping it for a while. This is my daily driver. Thanks for what you do. Because of you and your videos, I've become a sound DIY mechanic. In fact, I replaced a transmission from the things I learned from you. Scott, awesome. Love hearing stuff like that. Okay, so on to your questions. Is it normal to burn oil at 700-mile intervals? No. In fact, I think the Honda manual somewhere states somewhere in the neighborhood, if you're burning a quart of oil in less than 1,000 miles, then that is certainly an issue. And the engine is burning excessive amounts of oil. So yeah, if that happens, that's no bueno. And in my experience, a lot of people say just replace the valve seals, and they want to go for something simple. But engines don't really work that way. They seem to wear out all at once across the board, meaning that it's usually piston rings or stuck oil control rings or enough stuff going wrong to where you'd have to do a complete teardown and redo the engine. I'm really encouraged that you're talking about replacing the engine as opposed to rebuilding it. Rebuilding engines, in fact, I'm going to be doing a series of videos on it with the Fairmont. To do it properly requires a lot of careful measurement, a lot of careful time and planning, and it's a lot more time than the normal DIY has. So replacement is something that I recommend. In your case, I wouldn't recommend salvage. I'd actually recommend you go with a rebuilt engine, one that comes with some kind of warranty. And considering you've spent the investment in the tires and you're planning on keeping the vehicle, I would say I would definitely go for something that was remanufactured. They usually come with like 3-year warranties, so you're pretty much hitting the reset button on it. As far as Honda 4-cylinders have always burned oil, and I think it goes back to how they're broken in, whether that's done properly or how they're maintained, or just a weakness in the design. It's hard to say, but I will admit I've seen plenty of Honda 4-cylinders burning oil like this, and have been asked this question on more than one occasion. As far as where to get it from, I think a good place to start looking is car-part.com. I'll put a link in the description for that. It's a really good way of finding out what's available in your area, both through salvage and through things that are remanufactured. It's been a good source for me. I've used it several times and have had a lot of success with it. So that's where I would look with that. But I think that covers your question. Anywho, moving on, Alec 40. Hey, Eric, big fan of the show. Hope you and your family are doing well. Has a 2000 Dodge Ram 1500 5.9 liter with 185,000 miles on it. Always well maintained and taken care of, although some issues are starting to pop up, and I'm afraid to start dropping money into the truck that is just tired. With that said, I love the truck and can't see myself getting rid of it. There is a repetitive banging noise underneath the truck that only occurs when decelerating in low gears. The banging will continue every 4 to 8 feet or so when I'm completely off the gas pedal. It feels like the banging is right in the center of the truck and only happens when letting off the gas. I've heard that this could be a pinion gear or ring gear issue. Uh, Sorry, as I really can't describe the problem. Do you have any idea of what it could be? I'm trying to look on here to see if this is 2 or 4-wheel drive, and I don't recall you mentioning it anywhere. If it's a 4-wheel drive, maybe something in the transfer case. Maybe the chain's got some slack in it, something, and even if you're not in 4-wheel drive. Another thing that comes to mind, especially if it's 2-wheel drive and you've got like maybe an extended bed or something on there, there's usually a center bearing in the axle shaft. And sometimes it's like a bushing, and it's there to take up vibrations, and especially at that kind of mileage, it could have worn out and could be a problem. So I'd be looking in the driveline is where I'd be looking. As far as the pinion gear or ring gear issue, that's a real tough one to say. I mean, you really chassis air might help you get you back there. But I would be looking, especially if it's coming out of the center of the vehicle. I mean, if it was coming from the back, I'd buy more into the ring and pinion type of issue, but I'm not feeling that. I'm saying check it to see if you've got like a center joint in the axle that might be bad, possibly U-joints. That's something else that you might look at. And as far as inspecting U-joints, it's actually pretty simple. Look at the U-joint themselves and see if you see any orange dust around the outside of the cups. If you do see some orange dust there, it's usually a pretty good indication that the lubrication is gone, and it's quite possible that U-joint is bad. Not to mention just taking the drive shaft and moving it around a little bit to see if there's any play there, and there shouldn't be. So if there is, then replace the U-joint, see if that problem is still there. Outside of that, I'd put the ring and pinion like down towards the bottom of the list, and I'd look for other things in the driveline, particularly in the area that you're hearing the noise. Once again, I'll have linked in the description a link to something I did about finding noises, an article that I wrote about that contains videos and other useful information that hopefully might help you. Steve Z, is it possible to jump start a car that doesn't have a battery? I have a non-running 2003 Saturn Ion that I just bought, and it doesn't have a battery. I don't want to buy a battery for this car until I make sure I can get it running. My other car, which is running, has a battery which takes 20 to 30 minutes to remove from the car. Because of the engine compartment design, okay, since I'm tired of removing the battery from my running car every time I want to work on the Saturn, I thought about jump starting the Saturn without a battery. I assume you would hook up the cables as usual, but what would be the best way to hook up the jumper cables to the Saturn? Connect the positive jumper cable to the positive battery cable, and then connect the negative jumper cable to the negative battery cable, or should the negative jumper cable be connected to an engine ground on the Saturn? This process would only be used for testing, and the jumper cables would not be removed from the two cars while they were running. Also, could the jumper battery be damaged by doing this? Because wouldn't there be around 28 volts running through the battery if both cars are running at the same time? Thanks. Steve, I don't think this is a good idea. It's the battery is like, the battery is the central nervous system to the electrical system on your vehicle, and it needs to be there. It sort of acts in many ways sort of like a shock absorber. It's there to try to help maintain that constant voltage in the system and also to start the car. So you start messing around with that and you start trying to jumpstart things without batteries, particularly newer vehicles, they freak out. They don't like this at all. They want their consistent voltage. It's like they're junkies. And if they don't have consistent, good 12 volts to their parts, they don't act right. And when you're jump starting a car like that, you're also affecting the car that you're using to jumpstart something. And that can be damaging to that system. See if you can find a friend somewhere, maybe go to the salvage yard, see if you can pick up a used battery for like 10, 20 bucks, as opposed to, I understand your reluctance to get a battery, but I'd say go for some used battery or something like that first before you go attempting what you're looking to attempt there, because I don't think it's going to end well for both of your vehicles. If you take them both down, then where are you? So what I would do is I would find like a salvage battery or just a cheap battery. I actually keep a couple of old batteries underneath my bench. I have something called a battery minder, which is basically something that you put onto, it's a mini battery charger that you put onto like a car that you're putting in storage for a long period of time. And I have found it to be super good at bringing back old batteries. It has a desulfating feature on it, and it's really a cool piece of kit. In fact, I was doing a video on it and didn't quite work out or whatever, but I use that to bring back batteries that are, having a problem, and it works extremely well. So in other words, if you find yourself a salvage battery, and if it's, hopefully it's in, what you're looking for is 12.6 volts. So if the battery has 12.6 volts, if you've got, all you got's a volt ohm meter, and you check it, there's a pretty good, you can reasonably assume that that battery is good. Less than 12.6 volts, well, that's when it gets kind of dicey, but it should be 12.6 or above for the most part. So that's how I would handle that. I wouldn't try what you were trying with the jumper cables and doing all that stuff. That just doesn't feel like it would end well. Blood scatter. I like it. Hey, Eric, love your show. I have a question about my BMW E46 328i, manual, 85,000 miles on the odometer. Long story short, I can feel a noticeable vibration in the steering wheel when I reach 90 miles per hour, and it gets worse at the higher the speed. No grinding noise, no lights on the dash. Also, the steering wheel feels quite sloppy. At first, I thought it was the wheels because I had recently rotated them, but forgot to pump them to the correct spec. However, I did that and there was no change at all. I diagnosed that some of the front control arm bushings are gone, so I swapped them for some polyurethane ones, and the steering is fine now, but the vibration is still there. I can't find any loose suspension parts. Shocks are not leaking. Springs are fine. Wheel bearings look tight and are quiet. Wheels are balanced, and had an alignment done as well. Do you have any ideas of what might be causing the problem? This is a part where my lighting gets kind of weird. Okay. Suspension parts, loose suspension parts don't necessarily cause issues with vibrations. It's rotating assemblies that cause problems with vibrations. So in other words, something is rotating that's out of balance. And it could be an axle shaft. It could be like something, I don't know the year, you didn't happen to mention that, but it may be something worn out in the transmission or differential that could also be causing it. But usually it's final drive. Sometimes it can be the wheels or the tires themselves. I've seen tires, tires have certain speed ratings, and I would suspect that the tires on the BMW should be rated high enough to where that's not an issue. I think the lowest you can have for something like that would be like an H rated. Sorry about that. But in that case, I've seen, especially on something like a high-end car like that, I've seen cheap tires just cause all kinds of issues. They balance out fine, but once you reach those speeds, they get weird. And that's my concern. So I'd be looking for rotating things. And like I said, it may not necessarily be the tire balance. It could be the tires or the wheels themselves, but also anything in the driveline, axles that are loose, CV joints that are loose, anything of that nature at that speed. Because the reason why the vibration happens is because something hits a certain resonance that's out of balance. So it hits that certain RPM and it starts to vibrate. It's similar to like when you take your finger over the top of a wine glass or whatever, and you make it start to hum. The same kind of thing happens. There's a certain resonance that happens at. Same thing happens with rotating assemblies and anything, especially when they rotate at a given RPM that they hit, and they just start to resonate. And when they do, that's when that vibration comes in. So shocks, struts, wheel bearings, I don't see those causing vibrations. It's rotating assemblies that cause vibrations. So that's where I would look. Once again, link in the description to an article I wrote all about this stuff. Robert Colanas, sorry. Hey, Eric, got a problem with my BMW E46 318i. Weird. I don't get any signal to the instrument cluster that my high beams or fog lights are turned on. I've checked the fuse box, loose connection, the light bulbs, nothing. Am I missing something? I'm not very handy when it comes to electrical repairs. And that's not uncommon. Electrical is, you can't see it, you can't touch it. Well, you can, and it kind of hurts, but it's a difficult thing for a lot of people to grasp because it's so abstract. That being said, it seems that 2 indicator lights are the issue. So I wouldn't necessarily think that would be a fuse. I would either think it would be something like a switch input, or something inside the cluster, or something with the wiring or whatever in between, or possibly like an electronic module that's supposed to be connected to it, that's supposed to send these signals everywhere. When dealing with electrical problems, a good electrical diagram is your best friend. It's the roadmap to how the circuit works. Then you'll be able to look at it and see what's happening. Now, I'd hate to send you in there to take the cluster out and start checking for signals, but the only way that's going to be of any use to you is if you know where the signal coming in from these things is supposed to be going, what color wire, what connector, where it's supposed to be, and what you're supposed to see at that connector. So it's, these types of problems, it's difficult for me to walk you through something, and I can't just sit here and say, there's your problem right there. A little bit of diagnosis has to be involved, and I have also written quite an extensive article on electronics over at my website that could possibly be of use to you. So perhaps walk through that, and that could give you a better understanding of the electricity, and then with a wiring diagram, you might be able to track it down, or perhaps try a quick internet search to see if it's a common problem. And if it is a common problem, I'm not aware of it. I don't work on many German cars, hardly any at all, if I'm honest. And see if it is a common issue, there might be a common repair. And that might be a good place to start as far as an easy way to do it. Other than that, you kind of got to do it the hard way. And that involves some testing and some knowledge and a wiring diagram. Anthony Cox has a 2004 Pontiac Sunfire, and it seems my rear defrost has fizzled out on me. I noticed this towards the end of the winter time. I took a multimeter to the leads that go to the glass. I get current through the wires. And when I put a resistance test on the leads on the glass, I get little resistance. Now here comes the really weird part. I reattached the leads to the window and put the current test back on them and didn't get squat. I can try to put my ground somewhere else on that connector on the other side of the window, and it still won't show current. I do not believe it to be a short because I would have to move the wire around to see if I can get power to come back through. I'm sure I know the lead on the passenger side is the ground and the driver is the power. So I know I'm not testing the wrong wire. This has left me very perplexed. Do you have any ideas? Terminology is leaving me a little bit confused. So I'm just going to go with defroster in the back doesn't work. Obviously, the first thing to check is the fuses. I know you say you found current back there, but and that's also how you check. I mean, resistance checks, you can't have any power in the circuit. You have to make sure that there is no power to the circuit when you do a resistance check. Personally, I don't think resistance checks are the best way to go about checking for problems. However, when you're testing a resistor, which is basically what your rear defroster is, checking its resistance is one of the ways you go about finding the problems. And normally what happens is if there's no blown fuses and you have power going to it, a lot of the times the coating that basically makes up that resistor that is the rear defroster can flake off in places. And when it breaks the connection, that means that there won't be current flow through the rest of it. So you might have a little spot here or there that goes out. And most of the tests that I've seen for testing rear defrosters is you test it at each point along the way, looking for a break in the defroster. Now, you could also do this with a good visual inspection. In fact, to repair this, it is possible to repair this. They have special paint that you can get for the auto parts store. Say you got a rear defroster that doesn't work, ask them about the defroster paint. It's almost there's lots of different ways it comes, but it's almost like nail polish or whatever you can put on there, and you can reestablish that connection that might be gone as a result. Just over time, it went bad. So that's kind of where I would go. I would I'd do it easy. I'd turn the defroster on, leave it on there for a good long time, take my FLIR, which is like a thermographic camera, and just look at it. and I could look and actually see where any breaks are. That's like it's almost like cheating, but the right tool can get you out of a jam. FLIR tool doesn't come cheap. And as far as one of those laser pointer things, maybe that would work. I don't know, but I'm not sure how far you would get because those have a much wider field. But if it were me and I had a rear defogger problem, I would just turn it on, point my FLIR at it, and I'd know whether it was a problem or not. But aside from that, you might do a good visual inspection to see if you can find breaks in it. And if you do find breaks in it, see if you can get that stuff from the auto parts store and see if you can fix it that way. Taylor W., what procedure do you use to track down a fuel leak? I have an 89 Chevy 1500 that strongly smells of fuel in the engine bay while it's running. Matches. Just light them and throw them at the engine, and if it catches on fire, you got a fuel leak. I'm kidding. Yeah, finding fuel leaks can be, well, it can be tricky, but for me, I follow my nose and see where I can find it the strongest. And I just do a good visual inspection of the entire fuel system. And if you can't see the leak, it could possibly be under an intake. Maybe there's a fuel injector that's leaking. 89, that would be throttle body injection, I'm thinking. What can sometimes happen with those is those throttle body injectors can leak, but thing is, it would cause an engine performance problem to go along with the fuel smell. So I'm suspecting you might have a connection or something like that. That's when they started using weird connections on the fuel system, not just regular, old, screw in line type of connections. They started using something different. So yeah, that's that's how I would find it. I would just follow the fuel lines everywhere, looking for a leak, looking for anything any dampness that might indicate that that's fuel, and you can, dip your fingers in it and smell it, and you can tell if it's fuel. And look for really clean spots. Gasoline is very good about cleaning things. So if you've got a dirty engine bay and you're looking for a fuel leak and you see one spot in the engine that's like super clean, gasoline is a solvent. It cleans away grease, everything. So if you see that, that's a pretty good indicator that you found a leak. How's that? West G, what makes a good tire and what do you look for when shopping for new ones? That's a fantastic question, actually. I just put some tires on my Element last night, put my first set of Nokians on it, and I love them. They're really cool. I'm going to write a blog about it and put it out there. Anyway, what I normally do is I look at, like the ratings, especially in this day and age. I mean, there are people that have tried it, and I hate to say it, TireRack.com, I don't know why I hate to say it, because it is a really good resource for doing research on tires. And I've done a lot of research through them. I've bought a lot of tires through them, and I've been happy because not only do they have people that write in about the tires after the fact, but they also do their own testing on some tires, not all of them. And then they rate them as far as what their traction is and what their wet traction is, what their traction in the snow is, and, and slippery surfaces and, all that stuff. About the only thing I don't cover, I think, is noise. But that being said, I mean, the quality tires usually aren't very noisy. And in the case of the Nokians, this is how I know from a technician's point of view, is that, when I install a set of tires and I balance them, if you hardly have to put any weight on when you balance a tire, that's a good tire. I've been putting tires on for more than 20 years. So if you balance a tire and it takes hardly any weight, in fact, the Nokians, for example, the most I put on a tire was 50 grams. The least I put on a tire was 110-gram thing. And I think in all the time I've been installing tires, I had one tire, and I think it was a Michelin, that required no balancing whatsoever. And sometimes those little yellow dots that you see on the outside, you're supposed to line those up with a valve stem, because they've sort of figured out that that's the optimum way to balance the tire or set it up. I follow those recommendations, and I've always had to put some weight on for the most part, but the higher quality tires hardly require any weight to balance. Just, throwing that out there. Not like you'll be balancing your own tires or whatever, but as far as looking for them, I've used TireRack.com as a resource, and it's been a pretty good resource. Anyway, we've already gone 45 minutes, so I'm getting all random on it. Let's see. Juan Marcos Larios. Wow, that's a long question you got there. Big fan of your videos. Now I'm a premium member. 03TL had low heat out of the vents, so prior to doing the timing belt job, I did a primary flush of the coolant with a flush of distilled water. The heater core was, in fact, full of crud and dirt. And after the flush, I tested it and got over 160-degree heat from the vents. Success. But I continued to do more flushes to clean the entire system, especially during the timing belt job. I replaced the water pump, the thermostat, original OEM units, but managed to introduce air pockets into the system and have all these systems outlined in your overheating engine discussion. Glad you went there. All about bad idling. I have since refilled the coolant and refilled it with a spill-free funnel, and air manages to get in. I used an airlift vacuum fill kit. At the time, I tested the system for pressure and passed with flying colors. Also tested the radiator cap, no issues. But after twice doing a vacuum refill, I still seem to have air in the system. It'll overheat from time to time, and the heat from the vents is up and down. I've also noticed at times the engine is overheating and the lower radiator hose collapses when I rev the engine, but it restores to normal state after releasing the throttle. I put the car on an incline with the spill-free funnel to get more bubbles out. It appears no bubbles come out. I even drain the air of the coolant with the pleater valve on the engine block. Besides this, the car is performing great. No sputtering, bad idle, or anything. I will do a leak down test and rule the gasket issues out. Have you ever had such problems with air pockets and cooling systems? My 4th week fighting this one. Thanks for your help. Always helped me do things I would never have dreamed of, like replacing the timing belt and more. Keep up the great work, Juan. I love hearing how my work helps people, so thank you so much for that. All right, now to answer your question, you got an air pocket in the system, and I think you also have a bad radiator cap, and that is from the collapsing hose. So I would replace the radiator cap. I'd recommend an original equipment unit, and that may be the result of that. May be what's causing the air to get into the system. Radiator cap serves a lot of functions. One of those functions is to allow the coolant in the system to expand and go into the overflow. And as it cools down, the coolant contracts and it draws the other coolant back in. All this is controlled by the gatekeeper, the radiator cap. So if you've got hoses that are collapsing, there's something wrong with the pressure in that system, I think. As far as bleeding the cooling system, I've said it in that article, as far as overheating engine, that has nothing to do with bleeding it out. That just makes filling the system easier. Also, super imperative that you turn the heat on hot, but leave the fan off when you bleed it out. If not, air will be trapped in the heater core, no matter what you do. So if you're not doing that critical step of turning the heat full hot and leaving the fan off, then you're setting yourself up for failure right from the get-go, because the air will be trapped in the heater core, and you will have that issue. But everything you described is air in the system. Without a doubt, it's air in the system. You don't need fancy anything to get it out of there. You just need to follow the steps that are outlined in that overheat discussion that you mentioned. And also, I would suggest getting a radiator cap, preferably an original equipment one. And I think that should help you out in that regard. Oh, let's see. Andrew Gilligan, I cannot tell you how much you have helped me and my family and how much I love your videos. Yay. You've been a lifesaver for us who love to tinker but don't have a lot of money. I so get it. To my question, 2004 Chevy Trailblazer LS 4.2 L6. I have a loud suspension noise coming from the left driver's side rear. It sounded like a sway bar link, so I replaced the link and the sound went away for about 4 days, then came back. I checked both links, tightened them to spec, and still a loud noise. It's a clunking noise that occurs even at the slightest bump. I hope that's descriptive enough. Any ideas? Given that you went back there and replaced the sway bar link and it went away for a little while, I might be looking at the bushings where it connects to the body. That may be the case. In fact, that was the case on my Element. And it's really difficult to see whether there's a problem in this area or not. And once again, that's the way it was on my Element. So it wasn't the links themselves. It was actually the rubber bushings that went around the stabilizer bar at the connections where it attached to the body. That's where I would look. And I say that mainly because it went away for a while after you replaced the links. So if you had a bad link or something like that and you moved it around and maybe put it in a slightly different position, then it went right back to where it was. Yeah, that could be what's going on. I'll also put in the description a link to the finding noises thing that I put up there. Now I'm getting really random. Vader for 2016, Wendell Chase. Vader for 2016. Who are you really voting for? Vader. Because, you know, I think they got what it takes to rule the galaxy. Palpatine Vader. Besides that, it's May 4th. Come on. May the 4th be with you. Get it? Brian Burke, have you lost weight recently, Eric? You look good. Thank you, Slimmer. Haha. Yes, I go to the gym 5 days a week, although I could have a better diet. And honestly, I could spend more time at the gym. I've actually gotten to a place where I'm just sort of maintaining. And I'm not fooling myself and that I'll ever have a washboard stomach ever again. I did have one once, though. That was a long time ago. And I used to smoke then, too. So it's kind of like 6 of one, half dozen of the other, you know, washboard stomach, but smoking. Not a healthy combination. Let's see. One more actual question. This looks interesting. Ryan's sorry, Ryan, having trouble there. Bought an old 1961 Land Rover, which hasn't run in 20 years. What the guy I bought from told me was that the master cylinder for the brakes went out, and that's why he let it sit. Indeed, the pedal is frozen solid. How can I tell if I need to replace the slave cylinders or brake line instead of just slapping on a new master? Also, how do I find a comparable or better modern fluids for an old car, oil, diff, etc.? Well, the fluids are updated, but you'll probably be able to find them. And your best friend, I think, with this vehicle is going to be a service manual. I mean, Land Rovers from that vintage, come on, they're iconic. And, you know, they should last forever, but they're about as temperamental as they get. Especially, I almost think those had Lucas electrical systems on it, which Lucas was dubbed the Princes of Darkness. And, you know, sent several English vehicles just electrical gremlins, just sucked. My dad had an old MG that suffered from those types of things. But anyway, as far as to your question about the brakes, you know, given that it's a 61 and it sat in the field because the brakes didn't work, I'd be replacing the entire brake system. And no joke on that. I'd even be considering replacing the lines depending upon how rotted out they might be. These are your brakes we're talking about. So, and something that sat for that long, you know, and, you know, bring money because those parts are not going to be cheap. Maybe you'll find a good online source for them or whatever. But yeah, welcome to my world, because I mean, and I've been spending money hand over fist on the Fairmont just because that's what happens when you love a car. It just happens. Anyway, I'm going to cut that off there. I've actually gone almost an hour. The show's supposed to be 30 minutes, but I do what I can to try to give you as much as possible. And now that we're incorporating the AMAs, I try to go as far as I can. Anyway, if I didn't get to your question, I want to apologize for that. Once again, to EricTheCarGuy.com, and give me a few minutes and I'll put together some stuff in the description to give you additional information on some of the questions that were covered in this video and questions that you might have that I didn't get to. EricTheCarGuy.com is there for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. At least, you know, if my developer's doing his job. Just kidding. We take it down for site maintenance now and again. Anyway, that being said, I also want to thank you for watching. And once again, I can't see the questions posted to YouTube, so I'm sorry I wasn't able to answer those. But I'll be back again in 2 weeks, I believe. Yes. Well, wait a minute. Let's see next week. No, I won't be back in 2 weeks. I'll be back in... Well, I'll post it on my social networks. I'll let you know. But yeah, the show in 2 weeks, I've got some other stuff I'll be doing on that day, so I won't be able to make it. Sorry. But I'll do the best I can to field as many questions as I can wherever I find them. But strongly recommend EricTheCarGuy.com. Google+, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram if you wish to connect with me socially. Close each of my videos. But be safe, have fun, stay dirty. And once again, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.